Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. We've looked at a lot of heroes meeting up or fusing together in this second year of the crossover, and because of my younger preferences, a lot of them unabashedly include Batman. And the final entry is no different. Written by John Byrne, with art by Byrne and Patricia Mulvihill, I'm taking issue with Batman and Captain America, a tale set during World War II. Let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads.
The cover has its simplicity, but there's still a good dynamic vibe to it. The heroes against a metropolitan backdrop, the Batmobile and some other car behind them, as they seem to head into battle. I assume battle, because they look like they have about to punch a Nazi smiles on their faces. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. And in case mentioning World War II didn't clue you in, this is an Elseworld story.
It makes sense in this case, if Bruce Wayne's going to be Bat-age in the 1940s. Though it does make me wonder why the two companies never did one of these crossovers under the What If banner. I guess it hardly matters speculating now, since I don't know if they even use those imprints anymore.
We open to Gotham City in the first month of 1945, narration describing the bitter cold of winter as the bat signal is shown in the sky. The Joker, in a very subtle-looking car, roars through the streets, the target of a police chase led by the Batmobile. He's even got his face on his cufflinks.
Bruce at least is modeling his stuff after an existing creature. Mr. J is getting custom work done, copying his own mug everywhere. I forgot how vain some of his iterations were.
He unleashes an oil slick, making the icy roads even more dangerous. And even though some cars do lose traction, the next page has narration saying Bats is leading the chase, in which case he'd be hydroplaning too. But instead just deploys a couple of steel brushes from the car and cleans the oil away. So it's a sort of weird contradiction. They chase the clown to the docks, where the street dead ends, and Batman warns Robin that their foe may not be as cornered as it would appear. And sure enough, Joker ejects from the car, which just falls apart like it was a cheaply made office chair, and he glides away with a parachute, too far away for them to catch up without a boat ready. And Robin shakes his fist in anger.
Shake harder, boy!
They do seem to have the Joker Mobile as a consolation prize, but because its driver isn't that careless, Batman inspects it, uses tweezers to pick up a speck that seems to trouble him, and they dive into the water as the car explodes.
That actually wasn't the Joker's doing. He's insured by Progressive, and it looks like Flo just snapped.
We go to Europe, where the war has raged for 6 years at this point, and Captain America is joined by Sergeant Rock and his platoon. His leap here looks an awful lot like flying, so it really does remind me all the more of Super Soldier. Anyway, Cap goes to deal with what's pinning them down with massive firepower. A war wheel. Yeah, they're not compensating for anything, are they? It's got a lot of firepower, but its weakness lies in having so much focus on long-distance assault, so Steve makes sure to stay well within the arch of the guns, noting the gunners are too cowardly to leave the safety of the armor to face him. He rides one of the giant treads to the exposed gears, one lodged indestructible shield later, and the machine topples, all of which is not only described by Cap as it's happening, but also by the narration.
This is one of the pet peeves I have with older styles of writing. It often includes a lot of unnecessary description, and given a couple other comics from Byrne that I read, this seems to be his default, but don't just take my word for it. On the other hand, this is a period piece, so it kind of makes sense if the style matches something at least closer to the era it's depicting than when it was officially published.
The Nazis scurry out and surrender just as Bucky rides in with new orders for him and Cap. They're to return stateside for a secret mission, which perplexes Winghead since they have plenty of agents for espionage work. Rock tells them they just follow orders in this war, because where will they be if they start questioning them? Cap agrees and the two shake hands, glad to have worked together before the war ended.
Believe me, if I had that clip of Captain Picard discussing the folly of just following orders, I'd be using it right now. I have to believe there was a better line to convince Rogers here, like that maybe his mission might end the war sooner or requires the kind of skills only Captain America possesses. not something that could be interpreted as blind obedience.
20 hours later, Cap and Bucky are arriving at Gotham Municipal Airfield, and they're told to hold position until a priority takeoff is left first. However, after it takes off, the priority flight is hijacked. Cap instructs his pilot to follow, and since they're smaller and faster than their target, catching up is fairly quick. But they did just finish a transatlantic flight, and they're running on fumes as it is. Steve options to drop down onto the plane, sans parachute, because he'll need both hands for this stunt, and it's not like he's going to take his shield off. Bucky, if I mess it up, it will be up to you to try next.
If I fail, surely a teenager that doesn't have a special super serum in his veins will be just fine.
Cap drops out of his transport. He narrowly grabs onto the plane but is immediately fired upon, until one bullet breaks the cable he's holding onto. A sudden explosion hits the plane, and Cap is aided by Batman dropping from his own aircraft on a ladder and lending the Star-Spangled Warrior a hand. The narration really indulges how different but alike they are, and after exchanging uplifting metaphors like they were hosting a self-help seminar, Robin flies them close enough to infiltrate the hijacked plane. They make short work of the goons that outnumber them 4-1, narration rubbing salt on the wound and saying it hardly qualifies as a fight, as the heroes smile the entire time.
I play Harry Nilsson's Best Friend song, but it feels like you can almost hear it playing without it. Also, I don't have a clip.
Though Cap takes it a bit further, asking if these punks were typical fare for the Dark Knight, in which case his reputation might be in doubt. Rather than taking any offense, because that really felt like a backhanded compliment, Bat says that even the criminal underworld struggles to find goons these days because the war has drafted so many of the men to fight. They find a captive the reason the flight was a priority, Robert Oppenheimer, who was the real-life scientist that led the project to develop the atom bomb. This leads Bats to assume this has something to do with the Gotham Project, which the physicist is surprised Pointy Ears is even aware of.
There's precious little that happens in this town that I don't know about, Doctor.
At least in this day and age. After 2004, I start dropping the ball a lot. So many different groups of disgruntled people come after me, which by now I really should stop being surprised by.
Later, at Simon Airfield, our heroes begin questioning the hijackers. They keep quiet long enough to succumb to poison fed into their systems via then experimental patches hidden on their bodies, resulting in death grins that point straight to the Joker. This seems to confirm an unpleasant suspicion for Batman, which he keeps to himself as he and Robin depart. Bucky then brags his assumption that the Boy Wonder was looking at him in resentment.
I guess he knows who's got the better partner, and the more exciting life.
Meanwhile, at the Contradiction,
Bucky is going on hour 4 of sitting in a hallway, while Steve is in a meeting.
Well, look on the bright side. Maybe Robin was seeing if he could find enough substance to sue you for copying his gimmick. It wouldn't pan out, so maybe you confused disappointment with envy.
The meeting is actually about how Oppenheimer's attempted abduction is the third time Joker has made some kind of play against the Gotham Project.
Not to be confused with Project Gotham, the reality show where Tyra Banks judges your Killer Croc and Polka Dot Man cosplay.
The clown doesn't usually play in high-level espionage, so the generals feel he's a pawn for someone else, their current top suspect being Bruce Wayne. He's funding the mysterious project, so he's at least aware of it to some capacity, but is also too clean.
No one could have amassed his fortune without some dirty dealings.
Except, for the fact that his parents were shot in front of him when he was a child. Or did they think he hired a random crook to bump off his folks for the inheritance?
Since he has a pretty spotless record himself, Cap calls this out as flimsy reasoning, which kind of feels contrary to that earlier follow orders without question remark. They've arranged for Rogers to be Wayne's bodyguard to protect him from Joker's goons.
If Wayne is behind this, we need to know in less than 72 hours.
There isn't some looming threat or impending disaster. I just have a bet going and I don't want to lose.
Actually, that's when they're going to move a shipment out from a secret airbase, so they want to be sure before then. The generals later go to Wayne Manor, assuring its occupant that even if he doesn't have useful knowledge of the project, he's still a potential target, and Bruce reluctantly agrees to let Private Rogers shadow him. In the following days, Steve joins him to board meetings, recreational sports, even an outing or two with an attractive woman, which all becomes rather boring for a human fighting machine. One night, Bruce relents, to a minimal degree, and tells an anxious Grayson that Joker might be working towards something that might go down in the next 10 hours or so. With the soldier around, he can't exactly steal away as Batman to chase any leads as they arise. Joker has been even more unpredictable than usual, and it's too dangerous for Robin to operate solo, since he can't yet be privy to what Bruce knows, because reasons, I guess. It'll have to be a matter of ditching Rogers and keeping his appointment, in quotation marks, with the Joker. But it's only that last part that the private hears, skulking outside their window, and it seems to confirm what the generals had feared. Later that night, Rogers tails Bruce as he sneaks out of his room and drives into the city. They stop at the Wayne Foundation, and what is up with that sign? That's clearly modeled after Bruce, shirtless with his arms stretched out wide, surrounded by other people.
Sheesh, and I thought Joker was being vain earlier. At least the face on his car wasn't gold. Bruce apparently commissioned a piece to depict himself as a kind of Greek god or something. Maybe that was his way of trying to court Wonder Woman.
Wayne takes his private elevator to the top floor, telling Captain Desk Clerk O'Hara that he just has a little paperwork to finish. Steve knocks the old-timer out and takes the public elevator, which leaves him 5 floors short, which he has to make up by climbing to the penthouse, crashing through the window as Bruce grabs some documents. And they go on the offensive. Each combatant is surprised by the other's skills, with Batson noticing that Private apparently knows some martial arts only a handful outside their places of origin would know. I googled the forms that were mentioned, and I think they're fictional but names based on real-life styles, just with letters removed or added. Anyway, it dawns on Bruce who he's fighting, and after telling the captain they should stop, Steve realizes the same thing. Batman and Captain America stop brawling and shake hands, resolving to work together against Joker's scheme.
Insert your own still better than Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice joke here.
Elsewhere, in one of his hideouts, Joker is in a foul mood from his recent plans having been upended, even with the dynamic duo having been unaccounted for in the past couple of days. And that's when his mysterious ally calls for a progress report. After exchanging barbs and insinuation, the stranger with black hair says that a prototype is confirmed to be shipping out that night, and with it, the clown could easily ransom the city for $1 million. But the man warns not to let his fixation on killing Batman lead to any foolish mistakes as he ends the transmission. An underling questions bringing in so volatile a crook as Joker, and the man removes his Mission Impossible mask, throwing powder in the dissenter's face, and it's revealed that he is in fact the Red Skull, with the powder apparently turning the goon's face red and desiccated as it killed him.
And for those that haven't read this but want to make sure, yes, Skull does have a big ol' swastika on his jumpsuit. Apparently he wanted to hide his real face from Joker, but figured he wouldn't notice the Nazi emblem that takes up most of his midsection.
A group of soldiers stand in the snow just outside Gotham, having been tasked with standing on lookout for the arrival of Fat Boy, though they don't know what that's referring to. Somehow I doubt it's those large ice cream novelties, but they are pretty tasty. Anyway, they begin erupting in fits of uncontrolled laughter, even an apparent CO whose curse isn't obscured with asterisks or ampersands, but hand-drawn images. Odd, but kinda nice detailing at the same time. The men fall over dead and their uniforms taken by Joker and his goons, just in time to stop a convoy.
So the generals never thought to have their superhero call in, so that if Wayne was clean they could put him on guard detail for their package? Or did Cap not think it was important to tell his superiors that Bruce was in the clear? Someone was thoughtlessly stupid here, I'd just like to know whom.
In the cave, Bats reveals that he found plutonium in Joker's car earlier, and even the clown isn't stupid enough to walk around with that haphazardly, so it's possible he didn't know about it. Between that and the level of information he's been relying on, it's reasoned that he's working with someone, orchestrating a larger plan. Since Adolf McMoron and his crew of stupids abandoned their own version of the mysterious Gotham Project, they wouldn't be above using someone like the Clown Prince of Crime to attain the prototype built by the Allies. Though Joker isn't typically one to work for someone else, so that's another question to answer. And then there's Alfred minding his own business, because what's there for him to be surprised by anymore? Apparently, they have a kind of alarm that tells them when the bat signal is lit up, because that's what Robin confirms via periscope. The call is likely about the Joker, but the Dark Knight has to wait for his crime computer to finish compiling data. So the Boy Wonder arrives in Gordon's office, joined by the Star-Spangled Man.
I know he's jumping through the window in that panel, but without motion lines, it kind of looks like he's floating. But what really makes it funny is that the way he's smiling and the grip he has on the window also makes it look like he's somehow lifting his body horizontally with one hand. Captain America never skips Improbable Arm Day.
After the initial honorable greetings, which is not one way, apparently Gordon's rep has gotten around, the commish says Shore Patrol found one of their boats adrift within its patrol area, with 5 smiling corpses on board.
It was probably the Joker, but we also have reason to believe it was a farting contest that got out of hand. They did have a lot of chili on their boat.
With the use of Gordon's very large wall map, Cap does some extrapolating from a wooded area outside Gotham, using information he's not currently at liberty to divulge.
Hey, look, Chief, it's pointing right at this police station. Let's get out of here! Ah!
He works out a clear path to Washington, D.C., telling him this mission just got nastier. Across town, Bucky and Bats are driving along, utilizing some nifty infrared sensors that makes it totally okay to drive at night without illumination.
Hey, you killed the headlights.
Oh no, I've broken my most solemn rule. Something only Jason Todd is allowed to do. I'm a bat monster!
According to the crime computer, the area they're in has seen a lot of men and material moving around. I thought that was a typo, but it turns out materiel is synonymous with equipment. What's unusual is that the neighborhood is all but shut down because of the war. This means more warehouses are prone to being used as criminal fronts.
So explain Gotham during times without international conflict. Or is it that no one bothered to tell the city when a war ended?
They break into a possible Joker hideout, which will have atypical alarm triggers requiring more stealth than Bucky is used to on the battlefield. And he immediately trips one, unleashing a bunch of goons.
Drat!
They fight them off, but I guess there are more coming in than we're seeing, because Barnes likens it to half the underworld working for the Joker. Weird coming from someone that's faced enemy platoons on a regular basis in this continuity. Anyway, Red Skull reveals himself before hitting the pair with gas, and from there we go to Gotham Shore Patrol, where Rogers and Grayson find 2 more men dead, this time their faces turned red. Cap insinuates this wasn't the Joker's doing, again having to withhold information, and they ride off on a motorcycle, with the only confirmation being that the nation's capital is indeed a target. Batman and Bucky awaken tied to a car hoist, with Skull smugly admitting that he's been behind Joker's recent escapades and that his plans required him to be more active than he usually is. Having heard how effective the Caped Crusaders are at escaping traps, Skull informs them that the lifting mechanism they're bound to will descend once he and his minions are far enough away, then detonate a bomb that will do away with them.
There is only one way this scene could evoke the 1966 TV series more than it already does.
Did Batman and Bucky's insurance run out? Will Red Skull's tune-up make them blow up? How can the Dynamic Exchange duo auto-repair this problem? Stay tuned. Same angry time, same angry channel. The Ratsies drive off and, well, Batman looks to have disappeared without Bucky noticing. When they're far enough away, Skull stops to appreciate the explosion in the distance, believing himself successful where his chalk-skinned ally had failed.
Red Skull, that wasn't our explosion. Our warehouse is that way. Looks like that was, Louis the Lilac? Huh, he really stepped up his game.
Back with Cap and Robin, he's got an unsettling chill inside him, and that makes him want to get to a secret airfield all the sooner. Based on the most recent intelligence reports, which I guess they heard in the Batcave, they know Joker has Fat Boy, but isn't sure why he'd take it where it was headed anyway. Steve reasons that a base that doesn't officially exist is the clown's best shot of getting the weapon out of the city, and an attack there would be totally unexpected.
So our heroes know Joker has the prototype, but not the people at the base it was heading towards? If they intercepted intel, I guess that's one thing, but I would figure the base would at least be made aware by now.
And sure enough, Joker rides in with his goon squad, gassing soldiers and guards along the way, so they receive basically no resistance. A fancy-looking plane is landing, which is believed to belong to their mysterious associate, and Joker is tinkering with the idea of seizing it for himself. After all, his blackmail plot could use a delivery system. In the hangar, he exchanges passwords with an unfamiliar goon, and not really caring for the arrogance in his tone, but they still unload the package.
Be careful with that, you lout. We don't want it to get mad at us.
I'm not sure if he's joking this time. Is there something alive in there? Is it a velociraptor? A very large mogwai? Is that why it's called Fat Boy? There's a gluttonous little gremlin factory in there?
That's when Red Skull reveals himself, commending Joker and promising him more than a mere $1 million ransom, but the highest honors awarded by Adolf Ninebrain himself. When it becomes clear this is not a put-on, Joker is not thrilled.
Why are you upset, Joker? From what I have read of your exploits, it seemed you would make a superb Nazi.
That mask must be cutting off the oxygen to your brain.
I may be a criminal lunatic, but I'm an American criminal lunatic.
It really says something when the Joker has zero interest in being any kind of Nazi. Why would he? They're humorless, thin-skinned losers.
As Joker's men are taken out in the background, they each try their own signature poisons on the other, and all that green over Skull's face really reminds me of a certain amalgam counterpart. But Joker Venom and Dust of Death are too similar, and they happen to be immune to their own brand. So Skull options to have the men kabong Joker from behind with a wrench.
Kabong!
Very good, sir.
He's taken on board the plane, as it was always the plan to use him for propaganda purposes, display America's freakish monsters to the German people, and they take off for Washington, D.C. But they've got another craft closing in, the Bat-Plane, with all 4 masked crusaders on board. Batman takes this opportunity to explain that he knew immediately the gas that Skull used on him wasn't lethal, so he put in some nose filter, using his cape as a cover, and pretended to be knocked out, tensing his muscles as he was tied up so that they'd loosen when the villains left and he relaxed. He also knew Skull would want to show up Joker by killing Batman in a really showy way rather than shoot him outright.
That's our Batman!
Ah, classic Bat contrivance. Almost makes modern Extreme seem quaint by comparison. Though that would depend on what's being compared, because I think more recent writers might give that explanation a run for its money.
I don't think even Cap buys that. Look at that face. That is you got lucky pointy ears face. But it's not all bat flattery. Since the Batplane wouldn't have reached the airfield in time, they radioed ahead, warning the soldiers at the base so they could protect themselves against Joker's gas and play dead. Our heroes magnetically latch onto the Skull's craft and cut their way inside just before the engines fire up and the Batplane is detached, losing altitude. And I guess Bats and Cap made their way inside in between panels, because they're already on board, knocking around Skull's goons and berating the quality of scum the Fuhrer has supporting him. And don't worry about the sidekicks. They go into a brief tailspin before Robin regains control. Skull, meanwhile, locks himself in the bomb bay with Fat Boy, unsurprisingly a bomb, which the name was kind of a giveaway, and cuts control cables so now the bomb bay doors cannot be closed as they close in on Washington, D.C. He brags that since the explosive was a secret from the American public, people will think it was a Nazi superweapon, demoralizing U.S. troops in the face of the Third Reich armies. Then Batman just decks him right through the door window. He experienced some turbulence as Cap partially commandeers the plane, steering it towards the sea, and with some unexpected assistance, Joker damages the lowering mechanism, mostly to deprive Skull of any victory. They start fighting on the bomb, which feels pretty on brand for Joker, who even suggests his former associate surrender to be locked up, but in the middle of their brawl, the frame holding Fat Boy breaks, and it falls along with the villains over the water. Well over the Atlantic, the jets are forcing the plane in a straight line, and it takes considerable effort on the part of our heroes to get it to climb upward so they can avoid Fat Boy's detonation in a crazy detailed splash page.
I think this page does a good job of capturing the sheer destructive power it's portraying. It's hard for me, however, to describe really how it makes me feel. Yes, it's an approximation in a comic book, but there's just something eerie about it. Might be the dark background and uses of yellow, orange, and brown in such detail. In any event, great work on Byrne and Mulvihill's parts.
The shockwave does make things a bit shaky, but the plane levels out quickly. Bucky and Robin radio in, having landed on a dirt road, and Bat says they've seen the last of Red Skull and Joker, though neither he nor Cap really believes that.
Sure, they could have survived an atomic blast, no problem. Maybe there were a couple of lead-lined refrigerators they could have used.
We get an epilogue, apparently suggested by Roger Stern. 20 years later, a bat sub is in the North Atlantic looking for Joker Jr. The dynamic duo inside detect a chunk of ice with something biological inside. Batman and a much lighter-haired Robin bring it on board, melt it, and find it's none other than Steve Rogers. He awakens suddenly and in a panic, so to calm him down, the two unmask, revealing an adult Dick Grayson taking over for a retired Bruce, and his mentor's son, Bruce Jr., currently the Boy Wonder. The comic ends later in the Batcave. Bruce Sr. and Alfred consider this providence, as Captain America has returned just as the country is in need of him.
It's the hippies, Cap. They're growing stronger. We have to stop them now.
That was Batman and Captain America, and it's some old-school, cheesy fun.
Honestly, I don't really see anything technically wrong or even infuriating here. The art is done very well, feeling very classic while doing a great job of using latter-day techniques you wouldn't likely find in the 1940s comics themselves. And there aren't very many panels where heroes aren't smiling, though when they do, it's not always the same kind of smile. Maybe they're impressed with an ally, or a humorous response to a situation, or just the love of punching Third Reich losers. Though one's mileage may vary a lot in other respects. It'll depend on how you feel about Bruce Wayne funding an atomic bomb project, since his whole deal is non-lethal force, but it's not like there weren't occasions back in the day where that would require an asterisk. It's also very wordy, to the extent that characters describe an action we're seeing them perform, but I'm kind of thinking that's intentional so as to evoke the tone of the comics it's portraying. And even then, much of the narration at least seemed supplemental. Joker being patriotic is admittedly weird, since he's never cared much besides mayhem, comedy, and giving grief to Batman. But again, it's evoking a different tone, and since the alternative is Nazis, who else is going to side with? And when you think about it, it's kind of funny that the Joker would help save America. Corny, sure, but it reinforces a shared distaste that no matter how bad our villains are, they'd at least stop shy of being goose-stepping scumbuckets.
It's truly incredible how a murderous clown denounced Nazis so quickly, the whitest dude ever rejecting white supremacy. Yet certain people in real life that proclaim to be so great can't even manage it. Or they need a weekend to make a statement.
Anyway, it was an interesting twist to have the title characters more or less swap sidekicks, even if it was odd, like it seemed Robin needed Cap to come along to Gordon's office, like maybe Jim wouldn't have cooperated if the kid had arrived alone. There was an older story where Robin taught a group of police officers about escape artistry, so he seemed trusted enough in this era, but that is not as hokey as Batman's escape from Red Skull's trap. It really strains suspension of disbelief, but again, that's the era they're going for. Though it was weird that Steve agreed with Sergeant Rock about not questioning orders, and a few pages later calls out his superior officers for their lousy reasoning in suspecting Bruce Wayne of treason. It's like he didn't have that conversation with Rock at all, but hey, maybe just as well.
It's a fine enough junk food type story, full of patriotic pride and goofy optimism. It may seem a little old-fashioned, but given the kind of year 2020 has been, well, as everyone's favorite S.H.I.E.L.D. agent has said,
people might just need a little old-fashioned.
That's it for this season. Thanks for watching, keep yourself safe, and let's all hope that the days ahead are better for everyone. Except Nazis, forget them. I'm the Angry Spork, and man have I got issues.
you.